to get the latest on Ukraine. This is a fluid situation, of course, but we need to speak to some experts and get the real sense of what's going on there. We do that right now with Dr. Ariel Cohen. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center. He also served as a senior research fellow in Russian and Eurasian Studies and International Energy Policy at the Heritage Foundation. He's the author of 6 books. He's been doing this stuff a long time, folks. Dr. Cohen, thanks so much for joining us here. Boy, I guess I think about the last 24 or 48 hours, it seems like the world kind of dodged a bullet, if you will, in that this missile strike in Poland, perhaps was not a premeditated act on the part of Russia, but boy, it just highlights how risky things are over there and maybe potentially getting even worse. What's your current state of affairs over there?
Absolutely. This is probably the worst deterioration in the global security field since the Cuban Missile Crisis. But the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved quickly. Both the US and the Soviet Union did not want a nuclear war. Here, it's different because Vladimir Putin deliberately threatened the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine and wanted the world to walk him back from the brink. And he really, really wanted attention. He got it. Now it looks like China and India are sort of distancing in different ways, but distancing themselves from Russia, including in the recent G20 summit. Chairman Xi, who just won the power struggle in Beijing, was very careful not to criticize Russia directly, but the statement about the necessity to avoid a nuclear war was there front and center. Of course, Russia said they are against a nuclear war as well. But what you see here is a prolonged, protracted conflict in Ukraine. Russia thinks the time is on its side because it has more human resources and a greater industrial capacity, whereas the Moscow power circle think that the West will lose interest. They hope that the Republicans would win both houses and mistakenly, in my opinion, thought that the Republicans will not support Ukraine. And with the exception of some fringe figures who got reelected recently, the majority of the Republican Party and Republican voters do support our aid to the struggle of the Ukrainian people for their freedom.
So put this into some perspective for us when it comes to the situation with Poland at the moment. I believe the investigation is still ongoing in terms of, I believe, what is being called a stray missile that then hit Polish territory, and I should add NATO territory as well. President Biden's been very vocal about saying any inch of NATO, the United States will, of course, go to defend. But there are historical dynamics between Poland, Ukraine, and then Poland, Russia. Highlight to our audience why that's so important.
The missile fell in the Polish territory close to the Ukrainian border. The missile two missiles appeared to be, at this moment, the Ukrainian anti-aircraft missiles that hit a Russian missile that was flying towards a Ukrainian target, probably an energy target. And President Biden said that because Russia started this war, the ultimate responsibility is with Russia. 2 people were killed in Poland. For a moment, it looked like a Russian strike against Polish territory that would, of course, escalate this war to a whole new level. But looks like, thankfully, this is not the case, and we very much hope that this is not going to be a step in escalation. But the escalation is deliberate Russian destruction of the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, in which hundreds of thousands of civilians remain without electricity and heat in the middle of the war. So the Russians are trying to break the spirit of resistance in Ukraine.
Dr. Cohen, we're now many months into this war in Ukraine. We're coming upon, the winter season in that part of the world. Based upon your experience, how do you think this war resolves itself? How do you think it plays out, and maybe over what time frame?
I think we are going to see fighting in winter, which is brutal. It will get into the negative 10s and 20s occasionally there, or the thaw may be freezing, but it's still December through March is quite nasty. Then there'll be a little hiatus when the mud season strikes late March, early April, and then into the summer. So I see probably close to another year unless something major happens. Look, Russian history teaches us that every Tsar, every ruler that loses a war loses power. And Mr. Putin is a great student of Russian history. He knows he will not be an exception.
All right, Dr. Ariel Cohen, thank you so much for joining us there. We appreciate getting your thoughts and your perspective. Dr. Ariel Cohen, he's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center, getting the latest on the fighting in Ukraine. And as Dr. Cohen was saying, Kriti, it doesn't seem to be any resolution in sight at this point.
Yeah, and even I believe the Joint Chief of Staff, the Pentagon, yesterday is talking about, well, the timeline is going to extend certainly into the winter.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to get more content like this.